Polly's truck is 22 years old, paint gone chalky on the hood. One hubcap is missing the exhaust rattles every time he backs out. He leaves at 6:40 every single morning, same time, same route. You've seen it for 3 years and never once asked where he goes. Nothing about Polly invites a second look, and that's exactly the point. Same gray fleece from October through March, 3 years running. He mows his own lawn every Saturday, pushes the mower himself. His wife's Honda has 141,000 miles on it and counting. Guess his net worth from the driveway. You'd guess wrong. Wrong by close to $2 million, actually. Here's what nobody on this street knows about him. Polly owns 5 rental properties, quietly, without a single mention. Not flashy condos downtown. Small, unremarkable houses. The kind of houses that blend into a street unnoticed. 2 of them sit 11 minutes from where you are right now. You're going to want to know exactly how this happened. Stay with this one because it gets stranger. Think about your own street for just a second. There's probably a version of Polly on it right now today. Someone whose car is too old, whose clothes are too plain. It was 2011 and he bought a foreclosure for $61,400 because it was the only thing he could afford after a divorce split his savings in half. He didn't have a plan. He had a spare bedroom he couldn't fill and a mortgage payment of $402 a month that felt impossibly small compared to what he'd been paying before. Someone told him to rent out the second bedroom. He said no at first. Too weird, too personal. Then his HVAC broke in July, the repair bill hit $2,140, and pride stopped mattering. He rented the room for $500 a month. That single decision, made out of desperation and not ambition, is the reason 5 houses exist today. The renter was a night shift nurse named Sharon, 41, who paid on the 3rd of every month without fail and was gone before Polly woke up most mornings. For 11 months, that $500 covered his mortgage, his water bill, and left him $60 to spare. It wasn't wealth. It was survival, with a little breathing room attached. But something shifted in the way Polly thought about that house. It stopped being a place he lived in. It started being a machine that produced money. Whether he was paying attention to it or not, whether he was awake or asleep, whether he even remembered it was happening on any given day. Here's where it gets interesting. Can you guess what the second house cost him? 14 months later, Polly refinanced that first property. The house had appreciated to $79,000. He pulled out $14,000 in equity, not to spend, not for a vacation, not for a car. He used it as a down payment on a second foreclosure, 3 streets over this one, for $54,800. He was terrified. He told a friend he thought he'd made the worst decision of his life. That second house needed $8,300 in repairs before anyone could live in it. A new water heater, a rotted section of subfloor in the bathroom, and a roof patch that turned into a full roof replacement once the contractor got up there and saw the decking. This is the part nobody talks about. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't a straight line up. There were 4 months in 2014 when both units sat empty, and Polly was covering 2 mortgages on a single income of $58,000 a year. He ate cheaper. He canceled cable. He picked up weekend shifts doing inspections for a friend's construction company, cash under the table, $180 a Saturday. Most people stop here. The ones who don't are the ones who actually change things. His ex-wife found out about the second house through a mutual friend and called him reckless. His own father, a man who'd rented his entire life and never trusted banks, told him he was one bad tenant away from losing everything. Polly didn't argue with either of them. He just kept showing up to the properties on weekends with a toolbox, fixing what he could fix himself to save on labor costs, learning how to patch drywall from YouTube videos at 11 at night after full shifts at his real job. By 2016, both properties were rented, and the math had started working in his favor. House 1 brought in $1,150 a month against a mortgage of $402. House 2 brought in $1,225 against a mortgage of $471. That's $1,502 a month in pure cash flow before taxes, sitting quietly in an account nobody in this neighborhood knew existed. You might be thinking that's where it stopped. It didn't. Polly bought House 3 in 2017 for $88,200 using the same refinance strategy, pulling equity out of the first two properties instead of saving new cash from scratch. This is the part most people never learn, because nobody teaches it in school and nobody talks about it at dinner. Home equity isn't just value sitting on paper, it's a lever. Every time a property gains value, that gain can become the down payment on the next one, and the next one starts paying for itself the same way the first two did. Picture two people standing side by side with the exact same $30,000 in home equity. One treats it like found money, pays off a credit card, takes a trip to Cancun, buys a boat that gets used 4 times a summer. The other treats it like seed, same $30,000. 5 years later, one has memories and a boat worth half of what they paid. The other has a third rental property generating $1,100 a month every month indefinitely. Neither of them was smarter on day one. They just answered one quiet question differently. Do I spend this or do I plant it? 10 years out, the gap isn't close. The person who spent the $30,000 is back where they started, maybe a little behind after interest on whatever they financed to keep the lifestyle going. The person who planted it is watching that third property's rent climb, with the mortgage balance shrinking a little every month, the equity compounding quietly in the background of an otherwise completely ordinary life. Same starting number, 10 years, a gap that looks from the outside like one person got lucky and the other one didn't. House 4 came in 2019. House 5 came in 2021, right before rates climbed. The timing wasn't luck, it was 8 years of watching mortgage trends the way some people watch sports scores. House 4 almost ended everything. 6 weeks after closing, a tenant in one of the earlier properties stopped paying rent entirely, and Polly discovered, 3 months into the silence, that the man had been subletting the place to 2 other people without permission, and the plumbing had been quietly failing under a floor nobody checked. The repair came to $11,600, a number that for one gray week in February made Polly seriously consider selling everything and walking away with whatever equity he could pull out. He didn't sleep for 4 nights straight doing math on a legal pad at his kitchen table. His wife asked him more than once if this was worth it. He didn't sell. He borrowed against a separate account, fixed the property, tightened his screening process. Credit check, income verification, 2 references, no exceptions. And kept going. That one bad tenant taught him more about the business than the first 3 houses combined. Every landlord who survives has a story like that one. The ones who quit are usually the ones who only ever hear about the good months. His father, the one who called him reckless back in 2013, doesn't say that anymore. He calls Polly for advice now quietly, usually on Sunday afternoons, asking questions he'd never have asked out loud a decade ago. Nobody in the family talks about the shift directly. It just happened the way most real shifts in how people see you happen, not with an announcement, but with a slow change in who gets asked for advice at Thanksgiving. Compare that to someone who did it differently. Same income, completely different result. Polly's neighbor across the street, a man named Douglas, made $71,000 a year during that same stretch, more than Polly for most of it. Douglas bought a new truck in 2018 for $52,000, financed at 6.9% payment of $743 a month. He bought another one in 2022 when the first one felt old, even though it still ran fine. Douglas has nothing to show for a decade of steady income except 2 trucks that are worth less today than what he owes on them and a garage full of things bought to look like something was happening. Douglas isn't lazy. He isn't foolish. He works long hours and he loves his kids, and he'd give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. That's what makes this so hard to sit with. Good people, hardworking people end up in completely different financial realities, not because of character, but because of 10,000 small decisions made without anyone ever explaining what those decisions were actually costing. Nobody sat Douglas down at 28 and showed him what $743 a month invested instead of financed would have become by 45. Nobody shows anyone that. It's not taught. It's not advertised. The truck commercial plays every 15 minutes. The equity lecture never airs. This one is hard to admit, but it's the whole story in one sentence. The difference between Polly and Douglas was never income. It was where the money went the moment it landed. Here's the math on what Polly actually has now, all 5 houses combined. Total rent collected, $6,830 a month. Total mortgage payments across all 5, $2,914 a month. That's $3,916 a month in cash flow before taxes and repairs. $47,000 a year arriving whether Polly works or not, whether he's sick or healthy, whether the economy is having a good year or a bad one. For comparison, the median household in this country has less than $8,000 in total savings. Polly's rental income alone. Not his equity, not his job, just the cash hitting his account every month, outpaces what most families manage to put aside in an entire year, and it repeats every single month without him doing anything new to earn it. It doesn't require a promotion. It doesn't require a second job. It doesn't require him to be smarter, luckier, or younger than anyone reading a paycheck stub in this neighborhood right now. Now here's where it gets interesting. Can you guess what Polly's actual job pays him? $64,000 a year. He's a maintenance supervisor at a distribution center. He is not secretly rich from some other source. He is not sitting on a trust fund. His rental income quietly has become worth more per year than most people's entire salary in this neighborhood, and almost nobody knows it exists because Polly has never once mentioned it at a barbecue. You want to know the part that actually stings a little? Polly isn't smarter than the people around him. He didn't go to business school. He didn't have some genius insight nobody else had access to. He read 3 books on real estate between 2010 and 2012, drove past a foreclosure sign one Tuesday afternoon, and made a call that most people talk themselves out of making. He got a C in high school algebra. He'll tell you that himself if you ask, half laughing like it's a joke on the whole idea that this stuff requires some special kind of brain. It doesn't. It requires a willingness to do the unglamorous version of a good decision. The version that doesn't come with a photo, doesn't get a caption, doesn't make anyone at work say, "nice truck" on a Monday morning. Nobody has ever complimented Polly on his financial life. That was never going to happen, and somewhere along the way, he stopped needing it to. The next one on this list is the one nobody talks about, and it's the most powerful. Polly's properties are currently worth combined somewhere around $612,000. His remaining mortgage balance across all 5 is $298,000. That's $314,000 in equity. Quiet, unannounced, sitting behind 5 ordinary front doors on 3 different streets, while his truck still has a missing hubcap and his fleece jacket has a hole starting near the left cuff. Here's a number that might change how you think about your own next 10 years. If Polly does nothing else, no new purchases, no refinances, nothing, those 5 mortgages will be paid off by 2041. At that point, $6,830 a month in rent becomes $6,830 a month in almost pure income, adjusted upward for 2 decades of rising rents along the way. That's somewhere near $82,000 a year, arriving every single month for the rest of his life without him lifting a finger. Sit with that number for a second because it's easy to skim past. $82,000 a year arriving, whether Polly is 55 or 75, whether he's healthy or in a hospital bed, whether the distribution center where he works still exists or shut down years ago. Most retirement plans in this country are built around hoping a 401k grows enough and hoping Social Security still looks the same by the time it matters. Polly built something that doesn't hope. It just pays on a schedule, regardless of what happens to him personally. You're probably doing the math on your own situation right now. That's the point. Maybe you're thinking about the $340 a month you're paying toward a car that's worth less every time you check. Maybe you're thinking about the $6,200 sitting in a savings account, earning almost nothing while inflation quietly eats it. Maybe you're thinking about nothing at all yet, and that's fine too. Most people don't start thinking about it until a night like this one, watching a video about a man with a broken hubcap, wondering for the first time what their own quiet version of this could look like. There's a woman 2 doors down from Polly, Cynthia, 52, who's lived on the street longer than anyone. She'll tell you without hesitation exactly who on the block is doing well, and Polly's name has never once come up in that conversation. She'd point to the family with the new SUV and the in-ground pool. She'd point to the couple who redid their kitchen last spring with the marble countertops everyone admired at the block party. She would never point to the man in the gray fleece with the missing hubcap because the entire neighborhood's sense of who has money is built on a handful of visible signals that have almost nothing to do with actual wealth. 2 of Polly's 5 houses sit on streets you've driven down more times than you could count. Past the gas station on the corner, past the elementary school with the faded playground equipment, past a house with blue shutters that's been rented to the same family for 6 years without a single late payment. You've probably driven past one of Polly's properties in the last month without knowing it belonged to anyone in particular. It just looked like a house. That's exactly what it was designed to look like. This is the quiet trick nobody tells you about growing up. Spending is loud. It announces itself in driveways and on Instagram and at the shop it happened in. Building is silent. It happens in refinance paperwork nobody sees, in a spreadsheet on a laptop at 10 p.m., and a decision to drive the old truck 2 more years instead of trading it in. By the time building becomes visible, a paid-off house, a retirement account nobody has to think about, it's usually decades too late for anyone to learn from watching it happen. They only see the result, and by then it looks like luck. The uncomfortable truth is that most people had the same opportunity Polly had. The foreclosure signs were on the same streets. The interest rates were the same for everyone. The information about refinancing equity into a second property isn't secret. It's in every basic real estate book published in the last 30 years. What separated Polly wasn't access. It was that he made the decision at 34 years old, scared and underqualified and not at all sure it would work, instead of waiting for a version of himself that felt ready. Most people are still waiting for that version of themselves. It never actually arrives. The people who build something did it while still feeling unprepared. Ask yourself honestly, what are you actually waiting for? A higher salary that always seems to arrive with higher expenses attached to it? A market that finally feels safe, as if any market has ever announced itself as safe in advance? A feeling of certainty that, if you're honest, you've never once had about any major decision in your life, including the ones that turned out fine? Polly wasn't certain. He was 34, recently divorced, living paycheck to paycheck with a spare bedroom and a stranger's credit report in his hand, and he made the call anyway. Certainty was never the requirement. It just felt like it was. There's a version of you 5 years from now who either has 3 houses working quietly in the background or has 3 car payments and a garage full of things that depreciated the moment they were driven off the lot. Nobody will be able to tell which version of you exists just by looking at your driveway. That's the part that should sit with you. Polly still waves at you from across the street. He still complains about the price of eggs at the grocery store like everyone else. $5.80 a dozen last week, he mentioned it twice. He still drives that same rattling truck to the same job at 6:40 every morning, past the same stop sign, past the same house with the pool that everyone thinks is the wealthy one. Nothing about his life looks different from the outside. It never will. That was never the point. Somewhere on his street, and maybe on yours, a decision is sitting, right now, unmade, waiting for someone unprepared enough to make it anyway. It doesn't come with music behind it. It doesn't come with a crowd watching. It comes on a Tuesday afternoon in a spare bedroom or in front of a foreclosure sign nobody else stopped to read twice. It might not even look like a real estate decision at all. It might look like refusing the second truck payment. It might look like calling a lender just to ask a question you're embarrassed you don't already know the answer to. It might look like the $340 a month that's currently going towards something depreciating instead of something that could quietly, over 15 or 20 years, become a version of the 5 houses nobody suspects Polly owns. Small, unglamorous, boring on a Tuesday. That's what all of this actually looked like while it was happening. Nobody films the boring Tuesday. Everyone films the result 20 years later and calls it luck. The people who build quiet wealth are almost never the ones who look like they're building anything at all. They're the ones you've already stopped noticing, the ones whose driveways tell you nothing at all about what's actually theirs.